So variables will be used quite a bit, right? Variables, they have this, they're used widely, and you want to place values into a variable, and then you use that variable in your script. You call it out different times. So in what I've seen with scripting is you could create or make a get request. So if I'm going to query a cloud API and I want to determine how many access points there are at a site, I need to put that response that the API will give me into something so I could use it later on. And so I take that response and I put it into a variable. And so you name that variable uh, whatever you want, and it just contains a value, right? So if we dig into variables, um, let's use an example. And so I'm taking all of these examples that I've written out from my blog. If you go to roeldinicio.com/blog, I have a category there called 0 to network automation, and I try to reinforce what I learned by writing it and then labbing it and then doing these videos. So we're going to use the example that I have on my blog where we're moving out of our room. So I'm moving out of this room here, and let's say I have 3 boxes. Those boxes, we need to write down what's in the box, right? You want to know what you're putting into the box, and so um, I'm gonna take collectibles. I'll put that into one box. I'll take all these toys. I'll put it into another box, and then I'll take clothes and put that into another box. So 3 separate boxes. What that would look like as a variable, the box is the variable. So this is the box. That is my variable, and I need to assign a value. And we do assignment with this equals sign right there. And then I will use a string. So if my collectibles, I'll say I have Pokemon cards. That I want to assign Pokemon cards to this variable called collectibles. And so now that's there. And then I have some other collectibles or toys. So I'm going to have toys. I'm going to define a variable called toys, and I will assign Legos to that. And so Legos is assigned to the variable toys. And now we have clothes, right? So now I have another variable, and I'm going to assign Padres shirt. And there you go. I have defined 3 different variables that each have 3 different values, which happen to be strings, right? You could assign a number to a variable. So you could say, number of boxes is a variable, and I could just define 3. And now there's an integer in in that in that variable. So I've defined a couple of variables. So you could hold an integer into a variable. You could hold a floating point into a variable. You could hold a lot of data into a variable. You're just going to use that variable later on. But we're going to keep it simple because I've been looking at some other scripts as examples. I don't want to get too ahead of myself here and overcomplicate things. But it's important to note that there are rules around how you define a variable. A variable cannot start off with a number, and I'll show you. So if I called this 3 boxes as my variable, Python will complain about it. So it actually shows me there with the caret that number 3, it's in red. It's an invalid decimal literal. I just can't have a number in front of a variable. It doesn't matter. So I can say 10 boxes equals 10. It's still going to complain. Can I have 1 box? No, can't do it. Right. So you cannot have a number in front in the beginning of your variable. A variable also cannot have spaces. So I can't say number of boxes equals 3. So now it's complaining. It's like, hey, which one here is a variable? There's 3 words. And so you cannot put spaces in your variable. So you would have to use something like underscores. You can have underscores in your variable, or you could say number of boxes, something easy to read. I'm not a big fan of using underscores in variables. I think it's a little bit harder to type out, um, but I do want to make it readable. So I like starting off with um, a lowercase, and then if the variable is kind of long, you don't want to keep it too long, but I'll uppercase the first letter of the word, put it together as one, and it's easier to read, in my opinion. And you don't want too long of a variable. I think that kind of gets crazy as you're making scripts. Like you always want to call out this long variable. The other thing that's restricted in variables is you can't have a Python keyword. So a Python keyword could be something like print. Print is I think I haven't tried this out actually. So let's try. Um, so print equals boxes. So I'm creating a variable called print. I'm gonna assign boxes to it. I don't know if it'll allow me. Let's see. It does. I don't know what function it what Python keyword you can't assign to it. Okay. So I can't use if, because if is used in like loop statements, if statements, and so we'll get to that in a different video. And so you just as we work with Python, we'll just understand some Python keywords cannot be used as a as a variable. All right. So you only want to use letters, numbers, and an underscore character in your variable. Just cannot begin with a number. You cannot have spaces in your variable, and you cannot have a Python keyword in your variable.